Unmasking the shadow reflex as the psychic site of collapse. In narcissistic systems, the survivor does not relate to a person, they relate to a projection, a mirrored simulation engineered through cold empathy, idealizing gaze, and introjective seduction. What appears to be relational is in truth a reflexive loop within the object world of the narcissist's internal architecture. The subject, believing they are loved, in fact becomes a living extension of the narcissist's frozen imago, a regulated echo of the narcissist's unmetabolized need. The survivor's nervous system responds not with clear reality testing within ASR2, but with the anticipatory shadow reflex, ASR3, a psychobiological inversion of agency and affect. This reflex is not the healthy anticipatory brace of a security attached adult, nor is it the primal panic of ASR1. It is a shadow reflex, a complex mimicry of love built from inverted attunement. ASR3 is triggered precisely at the moment the subject abandons their own internal coordinates in favor of another's object world. Under the idealizing gaze, this abandonment is experienced not as trauma but as transcendence. The self is praised, desired, made special. The gaze does not annihilate, not yet. It captures, it seduces, it arrests the subject in a moment of symbolic elation. A return to the original fantasy of being seen. And this is precisely why the collapse is so complete. Because in the moment the survivor feels most seen, they are most erased. This erasure is not external, it is internal, symbolic. It is the failure of authorship, and ASR3 forms in its place a mirroring structure, a regulatory performance loop, a disassociative brace that does not protect the self but hides it. This is not metaphorical. In psychodynamic terms, ASR3 is the site of psychic burial. It is where the central ego goes to die, not through violence, but through substitution. What lives inside ASR3 is not regulation, it is the accumulation of deferred collapse. Every moment the subject fails to speak their own truth, every time they choose survival over boundary, compliance over authorship, harmony over integrity, they feed ASR3. It becomes a second skin, a reflexive performance of selfhood that feels like protection, but is in fact dissociative containment. And so the subject enters what MPIT calls reflexive mirrored psychic inversion, RMPI, a symbolic reversal of selfhood in which the ego no longer generates its own narrative, but instead simulates selfhood through borrowed scripts, introjected judgments, and gazed based reflexes. This inversion is not immediately psychotic, it is survivable, but it is not sustainable. Eventually, the weight of what was buried in ASR3 becomes too great. The survivor becomes symptomatic, not only dysregulated, but derealized, not only confused, but disembodied, not only hurt, but haunted. And why? Because the ASR3 is a closed system. It does not metabolize truth, it only loops it. It does not discharge trauma, it rehearses it. It does not protect the central ego, it replaces it with a mirror. This is why survivors say, was it real? Did they ever love me? Was I real? These are not rhetorical questions. These are symbolic symptoms, and they point directly to ASR3, to the looping architecture of inversion. The void is not theirs alone. We often speak of the narcissist void, their empty internal world, devoid of authentic object relations. But MPIT now identifies that the survivor too develops a parallel void, not an innate one, but an acquired one. The survivor's void is ASR3. It is the psychic compartment where authorship is suspended in favour of adaptation. It is the place where the subject feeds on memory, performs from imaginary introjects, and lives in symbolic exile from the central ego. The narcissist avoids their void through projection. The survivor avoids theirs through compliance. Both are trying to regulate annihilation, but one does it by controlling others, the other by erasing themselves. Collapse is not a moment, it is a structure. This is the final recognition. Collapse is not an event, it is a structure. It is the architecture of ASR3, and this is why healing cannot begin with behavior change. It must begin with symbolic re entry. The survivor must walk back through the organizing gate, not by undoing it, but by standing still inside it until the reflex dissolves, until the borrowed gaze no longer determines value, until the mute child is heard, until the mirror cracks and the true self reappears. ASR is the psychosymbolic reflex that forms in lieu of authorship under annihilatory gaze. It loops collapse within a survivable reflex structure, but at the cost of symbolic death. Narcissistic relationships activate ASR3 by seducing the subject into mirrored compliance. What appears as love is the performance of being loved, a containment of collapse. True recovery begins by stepping into ASR3 with awareness, reclaiming the buried narrative, and metabolizing the unspoken core of psychic inversion. Peace out. Loads of love.